Okay, well here's our long hive. Get more about the materials later on, but this is our long hives finished. Some of the material here is second-hand, bits and pieces I found, like the top and the edges here. This is just a bit of colour bond. Underneath here there is a piece of a sheet of 7mm ply, and obviously we can lift this up. And I've got some insulation in the roof here. It's just a bit of insulation I had left over from a job. Inside here we have the boards. These boards obviously come out, and here are our frames. See, the frames fit in side here. They need to be fairly loose, because when they get covered with the propolis they'll jam. So our basic frames fit inside. Here's a follow board so we can build the hive out that way. We can have our frames in here, have our queen excluder. This queen excluder is made up of bits and pieces. Obviously when I've made these for people, I've got to cut down cut some pieces off the queen excluder, and these are the pieces that are left, which I've turned into another queen excluder just with some bits of timber. Okay, so that will fit in there. Then obviously we'll have the follow board comes up to the, which this follow board's a bit tight, but that follow board will fit there, and our hive is built that way. As the hive gets bigger, we can move the follow board further back and put in more frames. Here's our lid. Our lids will go on once there are more frames here. The lids sit on the top of the frames like so. And our queen excluder fits between the boards. There's some ventilation parts. We can either put them in or out. There are, when you're doing an inspection, you can take some of these out. They'll fit in there while you're doing your inspection, and you can then pop them back in. These little bits here are for the entrances around the other side, which I'll show. These will fit in and to block the entrances off should you need to. Okay. So that's fundamentally the hive. As you can see, we can close the lid. And these catches come up and hold the lid down. And big entrances out the back. There are two, depending on how big the hive is made inside, as with your follow boards, etc. And you can block these off, or you can have them open. The whole lot sits on a timber frame that I'd made out of some leftover jarrah to hopefully stop the white ants. As you can see up here, lost the plot. On the side of the hive we can see a ventilation point and a bee escape should any bees get caught in the lid. Chain obviously to hold the lid up, and that's about it. Okay, so usually try to keep the cutting down to a minimum of this hive. So we've got 2 pieces of timber here. This will be for the 2 sides. We've got 285 by 19 by 2.4 and 235 by 19 by 2.4. This will eventually, once we glue and screw this bit to that bit, we'll have a cut through the middle and we end up with the 2 sides. The overall hive is just under 1200mm long, so that we can match the timber that is available. So these 2 bits of timber will be joined, and you'll see the difference in height. This one will have the floor put in it, so we'll allow our 12mm down there, and then our frames will sit in the top here once it's turned into a box. So one piece, and again 285 by 19 by 2.4, 235 by 19 by 2.4. That's going to give us a good thickness for insulation, and by joining this timber with this timber, if there's any warping, the warping won't be the 1 piece of timber warping, it'll be 2 pieces trying to warp, and the warp often will counteract each other. So by having 2 pieces glued and screwed together, it will save it from twisting too much, because it is out in the weather even though it's painted. And this bit of timber here is another bit of 285 by 19. This one's only 1200mm long, because this will be the ends of the hive. So we can cut 2 ends out of that piece, and it'll only be single thickness, but of course you'll have follow boards plus queen excluders plus the frames inside, so the ends are less important for insulation than the sides, and there's less warping because they'll be cut in shorter lengths. Also we use the this is a piece of timber which will be part of the lid, and the other pieces of the lid are currently sitting up here, which is they're 3 metres by 3 metres by 42 by 19. They'll become the frame for the lid, and then we have our ply, which is here. We have 1 piece of 12mm ply, which is the base. That becomes the base, that'll be cut down, and these 3 pieces of 7mm ply. 1 will be for the roof of the lid, 1 will be for the tops of the lids, if you like. They go on top of the frames, and the other pieces for bits and pieces. End. Okay, I've marked out the drill holes ready to drill to fix this board to that board. I've left our 12mm gap here so that the floor, when the floor goes in, the floor is 12mm ply, so the floor will fit in there, and that will give the top part here where our frames fit in. So it'll be a bit like that. That's better for the camera. So we can see that the floor will go in here, and there's enough bee space underneath there for the bees to go through, and there's enough space at the top here for our top boards to go on. So basically that's where the floor will go, and our top boards will fit on here, and there's still a bit of space at the top. So these 2 bits of timber work well, straight off the shelf at the hardware store. There's no, you don't have to cut these to trim, that's the width that comes in, and that's the width that one comes in, which is perfect. Okay, so I've drilled all these holes, as you can see. The two boards are clamped together, and I have a little bit of 12mm there, so that I know that the base is going to fit in there, and that's going to be flush. These holes I've kept in from the end a bit. These ends will be tightly trimmed, but I've kept them in there because eventually the side pieces will have screws coming in, and I don't want to foul those screws with these screws. It should be okay. So you can see these are all drilled all the way down here. That's ready for the basically the screws to go in. So all I need to do now is to pull these apart. Maybe I'll mark them before I do, but I'll pull these apart and apply the glue, then put this back on the top, put it in position, check the position, put the clamps on, and then start putting my screws in. Okay, glued up, ready to go. Okay, we've got our screws in. We've screwed and glued the two boards together. We've got our 20mm gap here, which is for the base to go in. And as you can see, it's screwed and glued all the way down. That should be plenty of fixing to stop any twisting and keep the boards together. It's good quality glue, should be there forever. Obviously here I've got to do a tiny little trim on the end, and the same at the other end, a little trim to square the ends up perfectly, and then I will measure halfway and do the halfway cut. Basically should be about there. That screw may have to come out, I'm not sure yet, but we'll wait till the glue sets and it should be good. Okay, just a little bit about the screws I use. These are quite a coarse thread. They're actually a chipboard screw, which I find bite into the timber really well. So these sizes are what I've screwed these two boards together with, and this large size will be what I use to screw the ends onto these sides. I think this one here is what I will use for the 12mm ply that goes in the base. That'll be glued and screwed, of course, into here. That's what that rebate is for. Again, the frames, I'm going to have a frame, the frames will sort of basically sit like that. So again, the baseboard is through here, so we've got this distance here for the bees to crawl around, and of course our follow boards will go across the top here. Sorry, not our follow boards, our top boards. Okay, so this is all glued up, and I've trimmed the end off on both ends, so you've got a nice good end to put the end board on, which will go on here of course eventually. But I've got the 12mm here, 12mm ply, and I've been measuring that up, and when we have a look at the this is supposed to be 1200mm long, and it's supposed to be premium ply, but it's actually not even, it's just under 1200mm, which is a bit disappointing because I want as much length as I can get. And this is premium ply, allegedly. I don't know whether you can see the cracks down here, but I'm a bit disappointed with that, and I'm going to take it back and try and get a better piece, because this is it's got these holes in it that's been filled sort of, but the biggest problem is these bloody great cracks down the middle of the ply, which for what they call premium ply I believe is garbage. So I'm going to take that back and get it exchanged and see if I can get a piece that's at least 1200mm long, like the label says. Okay, so we've cut our two sides. That was that big long board that's been laminated. You can see the join there, that's all been glued and glued. And the tricky part now is to get the width right. Obviously we want to maximise the bee space in here, but we don't want the frames to fall through the hive. So I've temporarily set this up with a couple of clamps just holding it in place, and I've made a jig here to hold the top, measured it, and I think that is about the right position there. You can see, I don't know if you can see that, we'll go in a bit closer. That is our bee space here, and we've still got a fair bit on the top of that board there. This will obviously be able to go in and out, and if the bees put a bit of wax and whatever in here, we're still going to fit this down in position. This could be maybe a touch wider, but not much, otherwise when you go on an angle with these frames they will eventually fall through. So I think that's going to be about the right spot. So what I will obviously do is measure up between here and here at that particular point, and that will be the width of the ends, which I'll do next. Okay, I got one end on. I've just got 3 screws on each side. There'll be 2 more go in once it's glued. At the moment it's just put together dry. Eventually I will pull that off. Once I've done the other end and get it in position, I'll pull this off, put the glue on, and then screw it back on with the glue there. You can see there's a couple of clamps here, one on that end. I tend to make sure that the base is, this side is right down onto where the base is going to go, so that everything ends up level, and when I turn it over the base will go inside the timber. I'll show you that when I get to it. Often there's a tiny little ridge there, about 1/2 mil, and this side's about 1 mil, maybe 1/2 mil. You get that because the timber is never exactly as it should be. It's close, but it's never perfect. You can see that with this end in place and our frame pushed right over to the right hand side, there's still enough lip there to make sure the frame doesn't fall through. Obviously if the frame is on too much of an angle it will fall through, but we need this to be sloppy. Sloppy is better because when there's a bit of wax and whatever built up on here or on the edge or on the end, this can still move and it doesn't jam in there. More space is better than less, I have found. So I'm going to go ahead and do the same here. I'm going to do the same on this end with this bit of wood. I'll drill the hole, mark the holes, drill the holes, and then screw that into position. I'll check it all for square and then glue it and screw it in place a second time. Okay, so I've glued one end, glued this end here. That's come up pretty good. The tops are level. I've got a strap across here at the moment because when you measure corner to corner it was a tiny bit out. So I've got that strapped up so that it's square before I do the other end. So it's coming together. I'll just let that glue dry. But you can see that these frames will fit in there, and there's enough distance for the bees to go through that. There's enough distance for the bees to go through the frame here, and there's still enough edge for that to sit on there. Okay, so they will fit in there perfectly. My next job is to, I'll leave this for a while, this strap. My next job is to take the strap off, glue and screw the other end, and when that's perfectly in place, then I'll turn the whole lot upside down and put the floor in. Okay, the base is in, screwed and glued, and both ends are back in, screwed and glued. I've still got the strap on there because it was about 2 or 3 mil out of square, so sort of overstrapped it by a couple of mils, so when I take that off with the glue being set it should be fine. Probably being a little bit too careful, but you make it as good as you can, and that's it. I'm certainly not a carpenter. I'm a bit of a home handyman type person, so what we end up with is what we end up with. Okay, we have a basic box. Everything's glued and screwed. Started filling up the holes on the side here, which I usually do, cover the screws up, and that'll be sanded back eventually, and of course the whole thing gets painted, especially on the outside. Some people paint on the inside as well, but I usually leave it raw. You can see the frames fit in there, and plenty of room around it for the bees to move. And I'll probably start to build the covers next, which is just 7mm ply with some little handles on them and some vents to let some air in. So that's about where we're at so far. Okay, we've come a bit further. I've actually got the lid on, as you can see. Catches are done. And the lid's quite a simple exercise. That's I think 90mm, and the one at the front is 45, so we've got a slope. And I'll fitted the chains. Chains go on the outside, so when the lid closes, it doesn't foul with the chains inside the lid. These bits of wood here, cheeks I put on the outside, they've got to be sanded yet. The cheeks, when the lid comes down, the cheeks go over that timber there, so it ends up with quite a good seal against any weather. You can see I've put the follow boards on. Sorry, not the follow boards, the lids. They're all got little handles on them, screwed, glued from the other side. I've also put in 3 vents in the bottom, 25mm hole with a bit of fly wire over them so that the bees can't get out and the bugs can't get in. So sort of getting close. These boards go here. I've still got to make a follow board and a queen excluder to go in there. Just a bit more to do. These boards on the top, you can see there's a bit of a gap here and there, but they're made so that if there's a bit of propolis gets put on the boards by the bees, you can still get the boards in and out. Sloppy is better. I'm still going to make a couple of brackets that go on here so that when you're inspecting the hive you can put these back in here and they can sit there while you're inspecting. To maximise the size of the hive out of the timber that you can buy, there is a join in the lid here that's got to be sanded, but eventually this has got to have a colorbond roof put on it so you won't see that join, and it's quite solidly put there with the pattern on the inside, so yeah, it works well. Still have to make the bee entrances. I put a bee entrance that's there and also one here, and somewhere here I've got some little lids which will go over the bee entrances, and there'll be a landing board down here, so you'll have 2 entrances with a little weather strip, if you like, over the top. That's about it for now. Okay, another tricky part of the exercise is drilling these holes for the bee entrance. I start off with a small drill, and drill it through from this side to the outside with a slight downward slope. Once the little hole is drilled through, I follow it through with a clean cut bit from this side and from the other side, and the holes link up with a slightly downward slope so that any water drains out. I'll just so we end up with 4 holes on this side of the hive and 4 holes on the other side of the hive, so that the bees can have 2 entrances. So if we have the follow board up here somewhere, or the bees can get in and out until we decide that the hive is big enough. The follow board comes the other side of these holes, so we've then got 2 entrances. We have a look around the other side here. When you drill through with these bits, often the hole is not very smooth, so I attack it with some sandpaper wrapped around the drill and clean the hole out. Works out really well. Eventually I make a little roof to cover the holes like this to give it protection against the weather. There's also a little board that will come out from here for a bee landing on each one of the bee entrances. Okay, we now have some bee entrances complete with little covers and landing boards. Probably need to make probably some little plugs that we can put in there should you want to close off either one or both of the entries. Certainly when you've only got a smaller hive in the first part of the long hive, you might want to shut the second one off, completely close it off, probably with some plugs, a bit like corks, probably the easiest way, and reduce the amount of entrances they have to defend, because you do get some robbing. Okay, that's getting very, very close to being completed. See the bit of ventilation up the top here, a bee escape. Should the bees get trapped under the lid, they can get out through this hole. And there's also one on the other end. The little catches are in place. Little handle to lift the lid, and yeah, pulling a frame together in there. You can see there's 3 ventilation holes in the bottom. If it gets too cold, the bees will plug them up with wax. And then you can see the entrances, or the exits I should say, in the top there, beside the ventilation, one either end. These little racks here are so you can, if you're doing an inspection, lift the frames out, put one in there, slide the others along to gain access. Okay, just a bit about follow boards. Obviously, with our frames, say in here, we might start off with a small hive in here, only fit, I don't know, half a dozen frames, but we need the follow board to stop the bees going that way. Obviously, if the hive is too big, the bees won't be able to keep it warm, won't be able to defend it, so we keep the hive small until these frames get full, and the queen might be looking for additional space. Then we can move the follow board further back. Now this one's just clamped up with a bit of wood at the moment. It will be flat on this side, and the frames will fit right up against it with just our normal bee space for the bees to get round in. I'll put a little bit of a strengthening bit of wood on the other side, which is clamped to let the glue dry at the moment, because all we have sitting on this edge is just a small bit of wood, little bit of wood that's left. Would easily break off with a bit of usage, so I've added that bit of timber at the back to give it some more strength. Okay, so of course if that follow board ends up all the way further back, right up against the back wall, then of course it's almost due to come out, because the hive would then be full of bees. So all we really need to do now to finish this hive off altogether is to make a queen excluder. What I tend to do is I buy the queen excluder, which is off the shelf, and trim it down so that it fits in here, because normally the queen excluders are big enough to go on the top of a frame, of a hive. So they'll be too big to go vertically, which is what we need. So I would trim the queen excluder off and add a little bit of timber all the way around so that we can slide it along wherever into the hive it needs to go. Okay. Okay, we've put the lid on. Obviously in the other videos you can see we've got a timber cover under here. Then I've cut this cover sheet of Calamon down, and that's been screwed on, as you can see. I need to put a little bit of silicone on each of those screws so there's no leakage of water through there. There shouldn't be anyway, but I'll seal them up. Then there's a trim we put around here because of the sharp edge, and then you end up with a bit of an edge on the corner that you can catch your clothes on or whatever. So I'll put a little bit of aluminium there so that that's not as sharp. There's a fair bit of overhang on here so that the water doesn't, any rain doesn't sort of get in between this joint. It shouldn't do, but the overhang will help that. On the side, of course, these cheeks on the side here, they overhang this edge, so again there's no water can get in that way. Let's open her up. Okay, you can see the overhang See the overhang of metal there, so that keep the rain out. That's just about it. There's a bit of a list here of which I might put on a photograph or something. There's a bit of a list here of all the material. As you can see, by the time we this has all been undercoated. By the time we put the undercoat on, the material cost is getting up around just over $500. As I say, undercoated, ready for people who like to put their own colours on. Some people might want to decorate this so that it looks to suit them. You can see we've made a couple of plugs here. These will fit if you wanted to block off one or both of these. Those plugs are there to block the hive off should you need to, or you could open it so that there's one or two holes, whatever you want. Job done.